Hi there, everyone, and welcome to our AgTech webinar, Accelerating Commercialisation. It's really great to have you all here today. My name is Georgia McDonald, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer at LaunchVic, and I'm a medical sub in today. Unfortunately, Kate Cornick, who our CEO was going to be moderating this panel and is unfortunately not well. And so I'm here today instead in her place. I'd like to begin today by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands that we are all meeting upon today. For myself, down in Bayside, Melbourne, I'm on the land of the Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nations. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and I extend that respect to any Indigenous persons that are with us today. I'd like to welcome you all from near and far to this webinar. It's great to have so many people from Victoria and around Australia. And indeed, our events manager this morning got an email from South America asking if this webinar was also going to be presented in Spanish. Unfortunately, my Spanish is not quite that good. I did live in Argentina for 6 months, but didn't pick up enough to be able to translate this. But it is great to have folks from all around the world being able to join us today. So this is our third AgTech webinar that we've held in conjunction with Agriculture Victoria, our partners in this. And it's really about supporting the Victorian AgTech sector. AgTech is a really important aspect of Victoria's startup economy. And so to give you a bit of context about our startup ecosystem, the Victorian startup ecosystem has more than doubled year on year for the past several years, and we are now valued at over $23 billion. In 2022, Melbourne has overtaken in value peer ecosystems, including Hong Kong, Dublin, Barcelona, Kuala Lumpur, Jakarta, and New Zealand. We're home to more than 2,600 startups, and these are companies that use innovative business models and technology to grow fast and global and spread around the world. As of June this year, Victorian startups and scale-ups have created almost 60,000 jobs in this state. And that's why it's really important to the Victorian government that we continue to support work in the startup ecosystem. So when it comes to agriculture, Victoria is one of Australia's larger agricultural producers, with almost $16 billion of agricultural products in 2019. Victorian ag products account for about 28% of Australian food and fibre exports. But despite this, we'd found that our AgTech sector remained relatively small and underdeveloped in comparison to some of our other industry strengths. And this is why LaunchVic partnered with Agriculture Victoria so that we could increase the number of early stage AgTech startups here in Victoria. So today we're going to be hearing from two fantastic Victorian founders on their path of research commercialisation that kickstarted their AgTech journey. And we're going to also learn about the support available to accelerate that journey through Australian government grants and programming with I4 Connect. But before we get to that, I do just want to touch on a little bit of housekeeping. We've got a Q&A channel you'll see in the bar down below there. Please send through all of your questions and comments. You don't need to wait till the end. Send them through as they're coming so that we can collect them up, and I'm going to do my best to moderate that. We absolutely want to hear from you, the folks in the audience, so please do make use of that Q&A channel. The chat channel on the side is better for, that's a way you can communicate with the entirety of the folks that are on the webinar today, but please keep all of your questions to the Q&A channel. Another bit of housekeeping I do just need to warn you all on is that I've got two rather excitable miniature dash hounds at home with me today that I didn't quite have time to ship off somewhere else. their dog walker is going to come smack bang in the middle of this webinar, and they're going to go crazy with excitement. So I'm sorry if that happens halfway through, and I will try to mute that chaos if I can, but that's just the perils of working from home at the moment. So thank you for bearing with me and my two crazy dogs. So this morning we've got three fantastic guest speakers that we're going to hear from, and so it's my pleasure now to welcome our three speakers up onto the webinar stage. The first is Caecilia Potter, the CEO and commercial founder of Venso Labs. We have also Ian Reilly, founder and managing director of Altrutec. And we also have Tran, the commercialization facilitator at I4 Connect. Now, we are going to have the opportunity to hear from all of our speakers today. But what I'm going to start with is just drilling down firstly into Caecilia's founder journey and story, and then into Ian. Then we're going to hear from Taylor, and then I'll wrap it up with some questions for you all at the end, and then I'm going to get to all those fabulous questions in the Q&A channel. But to start with, I'm going to go to you, please, Caecilia. And could you tell us a little bit about your background and your journey, and a little bit more about Venso Labs as well?
I've had quite a long and winding journey to get to become the CEO of Venso Labs, because funnily enough, out of school, I actually started studying chemical engineering, which is the field I'm now working in. But after a year, I decided it was a bit too engineering-ish for me, and I switched and ended up working in Accenture in IT management consulting, systems development, business change, and so on. And then I moved to JB Weir. I was the National Private Client Marketing Manager, which was really interesting. I had been working for some stockbroking clients when I was at Accenture. And then when I had my first son, I decided that I should try something that wasn't quite as, I thought at the time wasn't quite as involving so much travel and so on. And I went back and studied and moved into interior design. And I actually loved that, but I have to say it was also extremely busy, and nothing really changed on that front. But so while my children were young, that's what I was working in and loved. But then my father came up with his last, and he thinks one of his most important inventions. And he was asking me to help with it. And I was helping with it, even with my practice. We did the actual drawings of the invention using Revit, funnily enough. But I was trying to do it part-time and still run my own practice. And one day I basically had an epiphany that I had been becoming so confronted and distressed by what was happening to our environment, what was happening to our waterways, our land, our air, the actual food we're eating. And for various different reasons, I had really been confronted with that. And so when Dad had been asking for someone to help, I realised he had an amazing invention that can really help us to do industrial processing in a much more sustainable and much more effective way. And I realised that could be used to solve a lot of the challenges that we face that are causing environmental problems unless we do solve it. So it was like overnight, I just realised I have to do this. And even though, as I say, at the time that seemed like a really difficult decision, I look back now, and it's some 5 years later, of a lot of hard work, but a lot of wonderful things happening. And I do not regret that for a second, because not just for myself, but my family and the wonderful people who are on the team at Venso Labs, that is what drives us all. And the sense that you can have an impact, and in this case, we're starting with an impact on global crop yields. That's what we want to achieve, and we think we can. That is just tremendously inspiring, and, you know, it's just a great thing to be working on. So I sort of had a diverse background, but here I am.
That's really great. It's always great to hear the winding journeys that founders take on to get to where they are. Can you tell us a little bit about what the Venso Labs or Venso Flow does, and then I suppose also why you focused on that AgTech aspect in the commercialization journey, and why you started with Venso Seeds?
So Venso Flow is the most efficient method of interacting particles of a certain size range, not enormous lumps of rock or anything, but more in your seed range or smaller or a bit bigger. And there's a huge amount of industrial processing in that. And we built a pilot which proved that we could get up to 90% heat transfer effectiveness, which is extremely high. But what's more important about it, it's extremely gentle on the particles that are being processed, and it has an incredible degree of refined control. So, for example, existing technologies that treat seeds can have hotspots, and they're quite, they can take quite a period of time to, for example, dry the coatings. And ours is not just much, much, much faster. It's an order of magnitude faster, but there aren't hotspots because it's extremely even. So we can provide this incredible level of control for many industrial processes. I think seeds came for a number of reasons. And it was partly, we have a brilliant chief commercial officer, and this was one of his ideas that he pursued through his contacts in that industry. And when we looked at it, we thought this is an area where Venso Flow can excel compared to the existing technology. It can offer something that is really needed right now. And the reason for seeds is that right now, the world is moving away from using, especially broadcast toxic chemicals. They're doing a lot more seed coatings, but they're moving away from chemicals that will leave residues in the soil that might go into the waterways. And that's happening with changes in EU regulation. But then what do you do instead? And there's a huge push towards biostimulants, biopesticides, bioherbicides, etc. But being biological matter, bacteria, etc., they tend to be heat sensitive and operate within a certain heat range. And there's been a problem with trying to deliver them because of these problems of the hotspots and the very long exposure to the heat, which can be in the order of 5, 10, 15, even 20 minutes when you're drying certain seed coatings. Whereas our process is continuous flow and occurs in seconds and is at a very controlled temperature range. So I guess we chose seeds because we felt we had a lot to offer, and also because it had such impact. If you can deliver better biological coatings and very precisely dosed chemicals that don't leave residues, and then you can do that extremely gently so that you preserve the vigor and viability of the seeds, then you can actually have an impact on yields. And so that's why we're doing it.
And tell me, Caecilia, in finding that initial avenue for the technology, have you had, and over the last 5 years, some kind of key learnings that you think our audience would benefit from knowing about that kind of commercialization journey?
Definitely, heaps. I mean, it never stops learning. But I think for us, particularly because it is a platform technology, focus was really important. And that's why once we proved it, we're focusing, 99% of our time is on this seed application. So basically finding out what you're really good at and what you're better at than anybody else in the world, which in our case, what we're better at is we're the only people and the best people who know how to run and design Venso Flow to optimize it for really good solutions. So we looked and said, we're IP developers of Venso Flow. And what else are we? We're software developers of a really sophisticated control system and design app for engineers. But what we're not is manufacturers. We're not seed coating specialists. So what we've done there is partner with leading companies in those areas to deliver the solutions that we can't, for example, by licensing the technology rather than us directly manufacturing. And we're talking to an advanced manufacturer in Victoria for that, who already exports. So yeah, I guess focus has been one of the biggest ones. Team, you might have the best technology in the world, but if you don't have a great team, then you haven't got anybody to actually build it and make it happen. So I think that's really important. And also just learning, educating yourself. For example, when I did the Wade Institute VC Catalyst course last year, I did that because for us to go and pitch to investors, it's really important that as the CEO, I really understand that world and the people in it. And that the Wade Institute course was just so practical and really connected into that community and has an ongoing network that's really helpful. So yeah, educating yourself, I think, is big. There's lots more.
Absolutely. And I think to that funding point, so the course that Caecilia attended was VC Catalyst, which is a program funded by LaunchVic that helps educate investors on best practice investing into the startup ecosystem. And we've got a follow-up question from the audience, Caecilia, about how did you fund the research proving out those assumptions so that, you know, when you were kind of going down this path with Venso seeds, how did you fund that? Did you bring on a partner, or how did you do that?
So my father was involved in that right up until 2020 when he passed away. So he was initially funding it, and then I was putting in time, and then we had some engineers involved in that who we were paying, but you know, who were also being very generous with their time. So in terms of funding it, deep technology is a long path and it's expensive, and you do need to have a validated proof of concept. So what we did there is we built the pilot, self-funded, and then we engaged VIPAC, which is a NATA accredited laboratory, to actually validate our final results. So through that, we have a proof of concept that we know has been externally validated. And then we've continued. When my father passed away, because I actually come from, there were 8 children and there's currently 7 siblings. And all of those siblings have been tremendously supportive of Dad's work. And so the family has actually basically invested a large part of their inheritance from Dad to keep his work going. And so, yeah, to date, it's a privately funded, but that has been a very expensive and long journey, and I've worked for years for nothing to make that happen. So
yeah, that's great. And we're going to hear from Taylor a bit later as well about accelerating commercialisation grants and other opportunities. Thank you, Caecilia. I'm now going to move to you, Ian, and unpack a little bit more about your story. I know that you grew up in northeast Victoria on a sheep and cattle farm, but can you tell us a bit about your experience and how you came to develop Adjacents?
Yeah, well, my journey's been a little bit winding, like Caecilia. I did grow up on a farm in northeast Victoria and went to university to study engineering. Finishing the engineering degree, I first worked actually in defence. I worked for the Army and worked eventually for a company that is now British Aerospace. I was also a volunteer teacher overseas for 2 years in a least developed country. As an AVA, and then returning to Australia, I did a master's, and then for the next 20 years, really worked in a technology consulting company called Altrutec, which is based in Mount Waverley, not far away, and that really gave me experience developing new technology products for companies around the world. We worked exclusively in the US, Japan, Europe, UK, China, and a few other countries. And so that was really around solving very challenging technical problems, sometimes what were considered impossible problems, and developing products and then getting into manufacture in some part of the world. So it provided me with a lot of experience across a diverse range of sectors. I worked in fast-moving consumer goods, food and beverages, med tech, pharmaceuticals, and doing that, really provided me with a background for doing innovation and solving really difficult problems, and how you could do that, really. And so I also got a good experience working with startups, some very successful, some that bombed out and disappeared. And they were mainly in the US, in the Silicon Valley, and in the areas around Harvard and Duke University, and also in Denmark, the UK, and Switzerland. And so it gave me a real insight into the startup world, and what founders go through, and how you can do it well, and how you can do it poorly. So that was a really good background to really get started. The AgriSense journey really started when I was on a holiday with my 2 teenage girls. We went out to Western Queensland. Although I grew up in Victoria, my family comes from central Queensland, out near Longreach, and we were visiting a property there that my grandfather worked in for many years, and so did my father. And so, talking with the owner about his problems managing his cattle, I realised that it'd be great if he had a GPS-based electric fence, and so he wouldn't need to employ people to do the work, and he could really improve his productivity, and it would solve a lot of problems for him. And I thought that was a pretty crazy idea, but if it actually existed anywhere, I thought it would probably be called virtual fence. So one day I typed that into Google, and it came up with a whole lot of stuff, including the fact that it was actually a very old idea. It had been around for like 30 years. And the CSIRO had actually developed some technology and patented that. They'd gone and done trials over about 5 or 6 years. They'd worked closely for a while with MIT on the process and the US Department of Agriculture. But I couldn't find any commercial product. So I went and set up a meeting with CSIRO, found out about where they were at, where their technology was at. And the thing that but the basic situation was they'd proven out the technology in an experimental setting, but there were other technology problems that needed to be solved. One of them was the huge cost and power consumption of a GPS, which, on a small device sitting on an animal was almost insolvable. That meant we needed to power it. We weren't sure how that could be powered. There was no proper storage device that could be used, no battery that would do the job. There was no real way of communicating wirelessly from some central place to each animal. All of that sort of technology was in its infancy when they were doing their research, and they hadn't solved any of those problems. And so there was quite a big jump between that and getting a product in the market that a farmer could use. But based on my experience of solving a lot of those similar problems in other industries, in other parts of the world, it gave me the confidence to think, yes, I think we can solve these problems. I'm not exactly sure how, but I know that if I get a good team together and we're properly funded and we can work on these problems, I think we can solve them. And one of the other things that I learned through working with other startups was that you don't need to solve all the problems at first in one go. All you need to do is solve enough problems to get a foothold in a market somewhere that will pay its way and demonstrate that. And people will invest in that, and you can then solve all the other problems along the way. It's like a car, you can build a car with an engine and a few wheels and a drive system. You don't need seats. You don't even need a cabin. You don't need a windscreen. You don't need all of that. You can make a car with a lot less and just solve those problems.
And so,
Yeah.
Ian, you know, when you came across the research and you were starting out, there were obviously a bunch of technical problems that still needed to be solved. How did you go about the more business problems? How did you know that you were going to be able to have customers for this product, given you could, you know, solve the technical challenges? How did you approach that kind of commercialization strategy?
Yeah, so fundamentally, we had two problems we had to address. One was, you know, where is the market and who will pay for this? And what price will they pay? And no one really had a great idea about what that was. Everyone wanted it for nothing, of course. And understanding where that price point was quite difficult. So one of the things that I was able to do is we stumbled across a Victorian state government grant, which was for $75,000 in order to really establish whether there was a viable solution to this problem and you know, a market ready for it. And that was funded by the Victorian state government on behalf of the catchment management authorities, which are not farmers, but they were people who were trying to keep cattle out of rivers and waterways. And at first I thought that problem is, you know, pretty small and, you know, how many people are going to do that? Well, it turned out that was a huge problem worldwide. But it was only a very small part of the overall market. So the first 2 years, I basically spent doing market validation. So going around the world, talking to people about what their problems were. Just one moment, because I've got a cat.
I'm glad it's not only me with the crazy pet problems.
I've got a can carrier, but she's been good.
Your pest is a little more predictable than mine.
I think that might be true.
So, yeah, spending about 2 years doing market validation. While I was doing that, I was building up a network of stakeholders and understanding who really wanted this product and what would they pay for it and why. And I had ended up with a huge variety of price points. But some of those price points, particularly riparian management in Europe or the United States, were very high. In other words, these were people that would pay a lot of money for, you know, I mean, I priced a problem in New Zealand where conventional fencing would cost $6 million and the entire fit out could be done for $2 million, even at a very expensive price point. So for them, that was a no-brainer. Of course, we would want virtual fencing at $2 million. So out of that, I both established what would be a good market that we could launch into and what would be a price point we could achieve, and then about designing a product and manufacturing to try and reach that price point. Over time, the price point rose because the manufacturing and distribution costs were higher than we expected. But during that time, the market also grew enormously. So it became a situation of what market do we target first at what price point, rather than, you know, are there buyers? There were plenty of buyers around the world. Yeah.
Great. And one thing I was really interested in your journey that even though you'd had a lot of career experience, but before you came to Addison's, early on, you went through the Sprout X accelerator program. So Sprout X is an AgTech accelerator program. It's funded by LaunchVic. Why did you decide to go through that program, and what kind of supports and skills did that give you to help grow the company?
Actually, we didn't go through the program. We used the co-working spaces as an occupant.
Yeah.
So I looked at a number of different accelerator programs when I started out, and a lot of them were, a lot of them we didn't fit. And part of the reason was we were ag tech
Mm.
and hardware based.
Mm.
And everyone ran frightened at the concept of a piece of hardware sitting on an animal out in the middle of Queensland or wherever. And we just didn't fit the profile of what they were looking for. And if this is a long-term investment, not a short-term thing, and the sort of funds we were being offered were like $20,000, we needed $2 million, not 20,000. And so it was sort of like, why would I give up, 8 or 10% of my business for $20,000 and not get anything in return? Plus, on the flip side, not many of them were interested in us. So we actually engaged in, I went through 2 different co-working spaces, and we were in Blue Chile at the time in 2016 when we met with Sam and Andrew, who launched SproutX. And it was opening up just across the road, basically in, 100 meters away from where we were. So we went in as one of the first companies, which was great because we occupied most of SproutX, and when we left, we were about a third of it. And the main benefit for us was that Andrew and Sam were bringing in all sorts of dignitaries and stakeholders through to promote the whole thing. And of course, what they ended up doing was showcasing us to everyone, because we were the largest company and the most, visible and most progressive at the time. So it was great for us in that sense. It brought us into the ecosystem more, and it established AgTech. SproutX established AgTech as an important startup, part of the startup ecosystem in Victoria and in Australia. And it also established that in Victoria, which was very significant for us, because, at the time there was Sprout in New Zealand, and there were various other sort of ag techie things popping in universities and other places, but there was no sort of flagship. And so I think it really helped put us on the map and put ag tech on the map. And that helped a lot.
That's really great. And I think you've both touched on how important having other supports are in the journey. It is a long journey. And so I'm going to now turn to you, Taylor, and if you can tell us a bit about, for the folks that don't know about AusIndustry and also I4 Connect, the work that you do and how you work with companies, and a little bit about the Accelerating Commercialisation Program, which is grants, but there's also other activities as well. So if you could take us through that.
No worries. Yeah, so my name is Taylor Tran. I've been involved in tech and corporates and startups for the last 25 years now. And in the last few years, I've been involved in like blockchain and prop tech startups. Also wrote a book on the co-working industry. In the past 2 years, I've been with I4 Connect, which is how long I4 Connect has existed. We deliver we're the delivery partner for the Accelerating Commercialisation Program, which is a service of the Australian Government's Entrepreneurs Programme. This program offers guidance from experienced entrepreneurs and up to $1 million in match funds for novel Australian innovation. At I4 Connect, I work with AgTech, MedTech, digital businesses, companies like Go Resources, MedTasker, and even Aerobe. Venso Lab is our current portfolio company of the program, and Agison was alumni, obviously, a few years ago. This program has actually been around for 10 years under different names. Probably in the last 5 years, it's been called Accelerating Commercialisation. You might also be aware of Ripe Robotics. That's also a portfolio company for us. And you've probably heard of Sea Forest. That's also alumni as well for us in Tassie. So we work, there's 25 of us around the country, and we work collaboratively across the country, 6 of us in Victoria, and we run fortnightly information session on the program, and we love talking to startups. So that's kind of I4 Connect and the program. So that's what we do.
So why should, for the AgTech founders that are on the call today, why should they come to you guys and to think about the Accelerating Commercialisation program? And at what stage is it best to start that conversation with you?
That's a good question. I think in Caecilia and Ian's case, spoken about early journeys and things like that. And I think we come as they get ready. So a good question as to when should you be talking to Accelerating Commercialisation? And the answer to that is should consider our program, not at the idea stage, but certainly when you have a prototype. And when you have a bit of a team, some governance arrangements, and when you're ready, when you've already kind of tried to get funding, but have been unsuccessful for some reason, because for our program, you do need to have a case for funding. And but you also need to come to us before what we call achieving first sales, because we help with the commercialization and the achieving of your first sales. So that's when you should consider our program. Yeah.
That really makes sense. And I'm going to ask Caecilia and Ian in a moment to talk us through when you approached the program and the support you got from it. I do just want to tell the audience, this is my last question for Ian and Caecilia, although I've got a whole lot more I could ask. So if you've got a question that you'd love to ask, please do pop it in the Q&A channel. I'd really love to be able to ask all of our panelists today your burning questions. So I do get those questions in there. Ian, I might go to you first. At what stage was Adjacents at when you applied for Accelerating Commercialisation? What was that? What was your participation with them like?
Yeah, so I originally approached AC in 2012. This is 2 years before I launched Adjacents, and found out the likely case manager was Ron Mack, and so I talked to Ron about the idea, and I kept in touch with him for 2 years, and then we launched Adjacents. That was on the back of a Vic government grant, and I talked with Ron again about when is the right time to apply for AC funding. And then I spent really the next 12 months doing market validation, including going around the world and building that up. So by the time I got to applying for my first round of funding, we'd secured our matching funding from a number of stakeholders. And Ron, we needed to have our license agreement with CSIRO stitched up, so we got that done as well. And at the same time, I then worked with Ron really for a month, full time, to do our first grant application. Mm-hmm. That was in 2 rounds, where I did the first draft and then reviewed it with Ron, and Ron went through it piece by piece, and then did a second, and then got that in, and we were awarded the grant. That was for $250,000, which was limited purely by our matching. But the key outcome of that from AC's perspective was we didn't have a commercial strategic partner at that time. We needed one, and we needed to be able to bring in investor funding and equity and so on. So the key funding from AC was go and get a commercial strategic partner, or 2. So during that time, it gave us 6 months to do that, and we brought in Gallagher, the Gallagher company in New Zealand, as a strategic investor, and on the back of that, they led our funding round, and we raised $2 million in funding. And on the back of that, we then did a follow-up application for another $640K, which matched our equity, and so we received nearly $900,000 from AC. The second tranche of funding was specifically to help get the minimum viable product up and running to the point where we could start doing validation trials on scale with customers and begin to ideally sell.
That's great. And Caecilia, for you?
So pretty much exactly what Taylor said. We had completed the pilot successfully in May of 2021, got the validated results. And at that time, we had also been engaged with a global seed coating company who became our commercial partner for the grant, who have a strong base in Australia, Barrenbrook. And so we were then ready to build the first commercial prototype. We had an application, we had a need, a problem to solve, etc. And so we contacted AusIndustry last year and applied sort of from that between May and August, the application was being worked on. And we got two really strong account managers there, Andrew and Stephen, and they worked very closely with us to help us, direct us as to the formats and the form of information that the government wanted, and to review what we were providing and give us feedback. And it was a very, I thought it was a great, I was really impressed, in fact, with the support we got from AusIndustry to prepare a comprehensive application. We needed funding for essentially our minimum viable product, which is this first commercial seed coating prototype that does multi-layering very gently and fast. And we were awarded an $860,000 grant, which again was limited by our match funding. So when I said before that the family had funded it for that pilot, the family was not in a position to keep doing that. And we really did need to get support. But without a working, demonstrable commercial product, we were a bit too early to go out to get to raise capital, basically. So the AusIndustry grant was absolutely critical for us to be able to get to the point we're now well on our way to achieving. And so, yeah, so basically kind of fits in with what Taylor was saying.
Yeah. And I think, Taylor, sometimes, people think, and, with grants for government, you've just got to get on the website, fill out some ghastly big, long form, and throw your hat in the ring with, gazillions of other people. But it's quite different, the support that you offer, isn't it? And you really do walk with people through that process. Yeah.
So this is the only grants program that I know of that you talk to someone or experienced entrepreneur before, after, during the whole process. So I think that's the value of the program. It's certainly for a very large amount as well, up to $1 million.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of people go through this program. What they found is the due diligence process, or the questions that we work with them on, the business plans and so forth, really prepares them for their Series A raise, whether they ultimately get the grant or not. So going through the process itself is of value to people.
Absolutely. And one of the questions we've got from the audience to you, Taylor, is with the results of the recent federal election, are you expecting any changes to the program?
I'm not qualified to answer that question at all.
I was just very happy to be handballing that over to you.
So I work for I4 Connect, which is a delivery partner of the program, and I'm not actually a government official.
No.
Can I make a comment there?
Absolutely.
Looking back, I could have launched AgSense in 2012, but the critical thing was I just didn't have enough money. And even if I scraped together some personal amount, that was very difficult when, I was basically in a situation with the family, we had kids at school, have all of and so on that you're trying to manage anyway. Having a discussion with your partner to say, we're going to spend $50,000 to go and do this, is sort of like, well, go and get a job instead, So the initial grant, which from the Victorian state government, that was actually the previous Napthine government program. It was a program that was introduced by John Brumby originally, which was the Minimum Viable Product, or the MVP program, Market Validation Program, sorry. Without that, I don't think we would have been in a position to be able to do the market validation that I was able to do. And without the AC grant, that initial $250,000, we just would not have been able to start. It was just critical. There was no other option available at the time. And they, I would like to see a lot more of those sort of programs rather than less. And most, I looked at even moving states to try and pick up maybe a grant program from New South Wales or Queensland or whatever. But almost all the state programs are not as, they're just not as easy to pick up and engage and work with as the AC program is.
Mm.
It really is a fantastic program. We are coming to a conclusion. I've got a couple more questions in the Q&A, which are really about advice that entrepreneurs are needing about getting their product in market and how to take those next steps. And what I would refer to you all to is the 3 AgTech pre-accelerators that have been funded by LaunchVic. That's with Farmers to Founders, Rocket Seeder, and also SproutX. Josh is going to pop some links up in the chat, so you'll be able to have access to those. And we really do encourage everyone to get in contact with those programs, which really are aimed at taking entrepreneurs at various stages of their journey and being able to hopefully get them to those next steps. I want to say a really huge thank you to Caecilia, Taylor, and Ian for your time today, your expertise and your insights. It's been really fabulous to hear your individual stories and the support that is out there and available. If you're interested in attending more of these webinars and finding out more about AgTech, you'll also find a link to jump onto the LaunchVic website and join our AgTech e-news, where we've got a really strong community of people that are passionate about this space, and we'll be running a number more webinars in this space over the coming months. But for now, everyone that's been online, it's been really lovely to have you all here. Thank you for your questions and your interest. And to Caecilia, Ian, and Taylor, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. It's been a great panel. Thank you.
See you.
Thanks, everyone.